Hello and what is up YouTube? It is I, G3Iron, back again, your bearded balded buddy, to chat about some psychological factors that are at play in how you're playing and enjoying Path of Exile. We've all seen at this point throughout the league, it's roughly a few weeks into the 3.27 Keepers League, so we've all seen all sorts of different strategy discussion videos and posts on Reddit and the forums. And folks, as content creators and as content consumers, as community members playing Path of Exile, we're all looking for ways that we can continue to push our builds, continue to push our stash tabs, and continue to make currency to be able to fund those other goals of increasing our characters, players' power as we are interacting with different sorts of content at this point in the league. So what is it about this whole get-rich-quick psychological phenomenon? What is it about that we are all falling victim to, and all of us seem to be baited and hooked by this kind of clickbait sort of title? Well, there's some psychological factors that are at play in the way how we actually are playing Path of Exile and the way how we're enjoying Path of Exile that have to go into this. And knowing something about yourself as a player can actually unlock your own player power for your own enjoyment of Path of Exile moving forward throughout the rest of this league and even for many years into the future. I say this as somebody that has been enjoying POE for far too long, but that's okay. You too can also be playing this game for more than a decade and still enjoying it a decade later if you can learn a couple of things about yourself. Much of Path of Exile is designed around one of two styles of farming and reward systems. And it's either a incremental gain system or a more big risk, big reward system. These two factors and two styles of both drops and progression, as well as RNG returns, as well as farming methods, these two big categories are going to be the categories that we're going to use to describe both our own psychological involvement with Path of Exile, as well as the rewards and the styles of content and characters that we're actually pursuing and playing out together as players inside the PoE community. Incremental gains can be defined by simply observing lots of different mechanisms inside Path of Exile, and once we get like a solid grasp on one of these, you'll start to see that incremental gains are all throughout Path of Exile. So imagine if incremental gains were like a staircase. Incremental gains are essentially saying you're at the bottom of a staircase and you want to get to the top of the staircase. And if you take even steps, roughly even steps, at a roughly measured pace, you will safely ascend the staircase to get to where your goal is, the top of the stairs. Incremental gains give you a little bit of a reward right now in order to then, by the end of several of those little rewards, give you the big reward at the final conclusion of all of your smaller rewards, work, and payoffs. There are a couple of systems that come to mind immediately with incremental rewards. Divination cards come to mind. The shard system for chaos shards, exalted shards, even mirror shards. All of those sorts of things are based off of incremental gains. A farming, a currency, a strategy of content, and even an approach to you as a player interacting with certain levels of content is viewed pretty much like a staircase, with incremental gains as the way that you as a character feel and express, and you as a player actually receive dopamine hits as you are interacting with the game. Those little incremental gains that you get along the way of your character's progress, or the content progress, or the currency progress that you're experiencing, are reinforcing to you as a player that you are indeed having fun because you're still climbing the staircase. Content and characters and even rewards that are of that incremental variety are going to get your brain saying, hey, this is fun. And the more fun you're having while you're playing this game or any game, the more chance that you're going to spend more time and more investment in terms of your energy inside the game, both your mental energy, but even physical energy inside the game, and more chance that you're going to even spend resources outside of the game. And I'm not just talking about finances to support grinding gear games. I'm talking about brain power, things like spreadsheets and path of building and looking at Reddit and watching other people's builds. All that is mental brain power that is really you still having fun with Path of Exile even while you're not playing Path of Exile. And all of that, for some of us, is related to having brains and motivations that are more geared towards incremental gains. That's where we get our fun from. But not all of us are the same. So while some of our brains say incremental gains and climbing the steady stairway is a fun aspect of Path of Exile, we like to see those slow but steady improvements to our character, to our drops, and to the content we're farming. Well, then there's another group of players, maybe this is you as well, who likes big risk, big reward, giant step forwards. You don't necessarily want to see your stash tab going up looking like a staircase. You instead vision the improvement of your character, the improvement of the leaps in content that you can take on, and even the amount of currency and rewards that you're getting back. You envision that not as a staircase, but you actually more envision it more like a ladder, or maybe even like a straight shot elevator or escalator that just goes up and down. You go into the elevator, you push the button, and boom, you were on floor 1, and now you're on floor 158 divines. Thank you very much. And all that happened in one big play of big risk, big reward. And this is played out in all sorts of ways as well throughout Path of Exile. Whether that's a gambling system like turning in divination cards or risking them or double corrupting items in the temple, there's all sorts of different gambling mechanisms, high reward for high risk possibility, sorts of gameplay, sorts of farming, sorts of investment, and even sorts of characters that are high risk and high reward. When you play high risk, high reward styles of characters and tackle that sort of content, you expect to go through dry spells, and you expect maybe you have invested a whole ton of currency at one point in time into a particular strategy and it hasn't paid off yet, but maybe the next map it will pay for the entire run, plus maybe several upgrades in your gear. That level of fun, and that sounds to you to be very, very appealing. That's a part of your psychological makeup as a player to say that's fun. Maybe this map is going to be a dud. Maybe this map is going to be a hit. I recognize not everybody's going to say that, but remember, there's these two different styles of psychological blocks that could be there to why you're not having fun. So let's talk about why we're not having fun. Some of the reasons why we as players might be thinking that we're actually not having a good time and saying, this is dumb, this is lame, this build is bad, this content's bad, this league is bad. A lot of the times the reason why we're actually saying that is because it comes back to these two different styles of motivational factors to our characters that we're building, to the content that we're playing, and to the currency that we are trying to target farm. So the way how this all works psychologically and interacting with the game is that if you're more of an incremental player, all the things that I was just describing about big risk and big reward were terrifying to you. I'm sorry, but congratulations to you. Give yourselves a pat on the back. You made it through one of the most terrifying videos you've ever heard, because to you, everything needs to be consistent. You need to see payoffs regularly. You need to see that you are making progress towards your goals relatively quickly. Whereas for others, those of you who are big risk, big reward players, if you're playing content and building a character that's more incremental in nature, that's going to be more of a slog for you. And you're not going to feel like, I hit the jackpot, I really made it big, that risk really paid off, or, oh, that risk didn't pay off, but maybe next time if I change my approach, or if something else changes, maybe I'll hit it big. That sort of player, if that's you, you just made it through the most terrifying thing that you could ever hear, which is an incredibly boring game called Incremental Gains. There's these two different kinds of psychological factors that are at play in us as players as we're interacting with Path of Exile. And if you are more of a player who is motivated by incremental gains and you attempt a strategy to get rich quick that is a big risk, big reward style strategy, you are probably going to invest less in it. And we're talking resources, mental energy, testing things out, actually going back and double checking things, and probably in-game currency to actually see, hey, I'm going to have patience to really see if this big risk, big reward style is eventually going to pay off or not. If you're more of an incremental gains farmer, then you're probably going to say, this is dumb, I don't want to do this, I just lost a bunch of currency and that's really, really scary to me. I need to see the numbers go up. I need to see my character constantly buying new upgrades. I need to see myself tackling newer content on a regular basis. Whereas if you're a player who is more of the big risk, big reward style, you're going to say this is dumb because the game's not risky enough. It feels like it's, I don't know, like a retirement community, and it's like 3 o'clock and it's time for dinner already, and then we'll catch the 7 o'clock nightly news, and maybe we'll stay up super late and watch Wheel of Fortune at 7:30. Ooh, we're playing it risky tonight. That to you sounds absolutely dull, and there's nothing more dumb and more boring to you than potential dullery inside your gameplay. Once you start to learn these things about yourself, it's really going to help you in the long run to actually get rich quick, and we're going to talk about that more in just a moment. But if you can identify in your own gameplay patterns, am I more of a it ain't much but it's honest work, incremental gains sort of farmer, where every single day you want to be looking at your stash tab or your character and going, well, I made a couple of steps forward, I made some progress. That's great. That's one thing that you can do, but leaning into that level of motivation is going to help you actually stay away from strategies that you're not going to find as fun and that are potentially risky for you as a player, both for your character and your stash tab, but also for your fun and for your enjoyment of the league. You're not going to enjoy it as much if you're trying out these big risk, big reward styles of gameplay if you're more of a motivated player towards incremental gains. The same is said for the opposite. If you recognize that you are more of a big risk, big reward style player, which, by the way, one player in my own friend group comes to mind here in the G3 Guild and Patreon community. There's one player who I know who does not like to progress through the Atlas and likes to simply jump from like tier 1 maps up to like tier 6 maps, up to like tier 11 maps, and then jump straight into tier 17s, not even jump into like 16 and a halves and 16s. Like, this person really doesn't like incremental gains and incremental progress. This person really likes to feel like their character has leapt and expressed leaps and bounds worth of progress in every step along the way of the progress that they tangibly feel. That player really likes taking on big risky things that can pay off big time, and occasionally they do pay off big time and allow for huge expenditures and big time currency wins for that player. For others of us watching this, we're going, that's terrifying. Like, I would much rather just have a slow and steady income stream and be able to make incremental upgrades as I'm playing the game rather than risk having several game sessions where I don't feel like my character has really improved much. So there's two different motivations that are in tension here. And we also need to recognize at this point in the conversation that this is also a part of a spectrum. Not all of us, just because we lean more towards incremental gains, are necessarily as much incrementally gained motivated as other players we might know. And, according to some other players, we might be big risk, big reward, or we might be incremental gainers, even though we're spending divs upon divs for investment for individual map farming, because according to the spectrum of currency as well as enjoyment, there's going to be players on either side of that spectrum of us, either players who are investing more and who are getting bigger risks with bigger rewards, or there's going to be more players who are more incremental in their games. We need to recognize that while we've got two really solid definitions here and two different sorts of player motivations as we're interacting with the game, we need to recognize that we as players, as a whole community, are basically on a spectrum here of enjoyment in terms of the content and the expressions that we have and the characters that we build, in terms of the styles of content that we're farming and the styles of characters that we're building for the sorts of currency rewards that we are expecting back from our gameplay and from the efforts that we put in. Now, Path of Exile as a game is built around this entire spectrum. And so there's layers upon layers upon layers of different rewards. Earlier, we mentioned the shard system. That's right, above my slightly balding forehead, there is a full-on Chaos Orb. And maybe that gets you super duper excited, because for the purposes of this discussion, that is the bigger risk, that is the bigger reward. Whereas over across the way on your left-hand side of the screen, there's the Chaos Shard, which probably nobody really is picking up many Chaos Shards at this point in the league. Shout out if you still are. Maybe you're a late league starter and you're picking up Chaos Shards. But for the most part, this illustrates the difference between incremental farming and big risk, big reward farming. When you pick up 20 different Chaos Shards, you know that you're making progress towards your end goal, which is a Chaos Orb. But it also can feel great just to have a Chaos Orb drop. But it's also possible that the Chaos Orb in and of itself is, as a whole drop, less common than the Chaos Shard. And so there's the difference right there between these two styles of farming and player motivations. Incremental gains versus big risk, big reward. Doesn't just have to be Chaos Shards. It could be Exalted Shards. It could also be Mirror Shards or Mirrors of Calandra, or it can be Divination cards and unique items. That's right. Divination cards basically are an incremental gain sort of way to motivate players to play the game and to view the progress that they are making towards their particular item that they are chasing. By the way, in a trade league environment, the entire economy acts as an incremental gains system for players who don't want to specifically target farm a specific item, but simply want to use currency farming the sorts of content that they would like and trading off the currency that they make and the content that they're farming for the incremental gains that they're gaining in order to gain the big payoff that they get at the end of the day, whatever that item is, trading with another player for that specific unique. Now, in a solo self-found environment or in a solo farming environment or in a trade league environment where you're still farming for big items, divination cards act as an incremental gain towards that big payoff at the end. It's really a staircase style of system, not necessarily an elevator style system. When you are getting those drops for doctors, for apothecaries, that eventually end up being headhunters and mage bloods, those sorts of systems are built around small incremental gains or smaller incremental gains than the sum total of all of those gains put together, which is the big risk, big reward item. A system like the Ultimatum farming system or the Valdo's Box puzzle sort of farming system, these are big risk, big reward style systems where players can take on, for a large investment, potentially in a Valdo's situation, losing your character entirely, basically for you to go through that system to get a big reward if you're willing to take on the big risk. For a whole bunch of players out there, that sounds absolute anathema and absolutely crazy. Players would never risk it. And for others of us who are watching or making this video, we're going, that sounds like living. That's finally a game that I can sink my teeth into. And Path of Exile recognizes that there's both of these styles of player motivations in the hearts of all of us along this spectrum that we all exist on. And there's probably going to be aspects of each of these different components that are at play for your character, for your content, and for your currency making strategy that you are looking for and seeking out as you're trying to quote unquote get rich in the middle of a league. Another example of this is boss hunting and boss farming. And so we've got an example here with the Svalin girded tower shield and the Dark Knight encounter that you get from the meteor encounter that you'll get from farming different sorts of settlers content on your map. Now, you could take two different approaches to trying to acquire a Svalin shield. You could try to just get the Svalin shield all in one go because your target farming maps that are going to produce the Black Knight, and the more Black Knight encounters you get, the more chance that it'll actually drop a Svalin. You could do that. The other way, that's kind of the big risk, big reward. Like every time you run a map and every time you fight the Black Knight and he doesn't drop the Svalin, well, that was just, there was like no reward for that. You didn't get your Svalin. Or you could take the incremental approach, which is in an economically trade league environment, you could simply farm, at the moment, 58 divines and then purchase yourself a Svalin with the 58 divines using whatever style of approach that you'd like. Every time you drop a divine, every time you craft an item and sell it for multiple divines, every time you flip items, every time you put together a stash tab of all sorts of sell out, buy out, flipping all sorts of whatever currency making strategy you want to take, every time you see your div count go up, you are making incremental gains towards your ultimate payday, which is to buy that Svalin from somebody else who's already got one. PoE as a game is built around this stuff. It's built around layering both of these things over on top of each other. Almost every single mechanism that comes out with a league mechanic is something that plays to both incremental farmers and to big risk, big reward farmers. Almost every single league does this. Almost every single endgame expansion does this. Almost every single boss has either got incremental gains available to them or has got as a drop a big risk and a big reward. Almost everything in PoE nowadays has got layers of both of these, recognizing that players across the board are motivated either to climb the stairs or to push the button and go up the elevator. And well, sometimes the elevator's just not working that day, but sometimes it gets you to the top and it feels great. Here's the biggest thing that I want you to take away from today. When you are searching for whatever style of content and strategy that you are going to take on, ask yourself, is this fun? Like, am I having fun doing this? And then you can go back and use some of these diagnostic tools and questions that we've asked throughout discussion today about whether or not this is more incremental or if this is more big risk and big reward. And hopefully you'll actually be able to use those tools to diagnose whether or not you're having fun. Chances are, if you're not having fun, whether it's with incremental gains or it's with big risk and big reward, you need to change up the content to be a little bit more of whichever direction it is that you're currently not leaning. When you're not having fun in the game, even if you are getting some drops, and even if you're getting big drops, chances are if you're not having fun, the league and the game is not long for your playtime. You're probably not going to be playing that character for very long, because once you stop having fun with the game, well, we're gamers, we're easily distracted, and there's a ton of games out there, so we're probably going to move on. So you need to be able to diagnose pretty early on if a content strategy for farming currency is actually right for you, if it's actually meeting your goals for what you're aiming for with the content, and ultimately with the end game of your build and your currency stash tab in mind. Are you more of an incremental farmer? Are you more of a big risk, big reward sort of player? Is the content you're taking on right now like, I don't know, ambush farming, or I don't know, running heists on end? I don't know, lab farming. I don't know, maybe trying and double corrupting some awesome gear. You need to figure out whatever it is that motivates you, and then you need to lean into it. And you're actually going to find out you're going to have a lot more fun than you expected along the way as you're using these diagnostic questions and diagnostic tools to go, you know, I didn't think that style of content would be that fun or would be that rewarding, but it actually ended up being a lot more rewarding than what I initially expected. It's pretty cool when we get to know things about ourselves as players, and it's pretty cool when we get to apply that to have a great time playing our games. Thanks once again so much for joining us today. If you liked our discussion today, you can of course like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about future video discussions, sort of in the vein like this one. In between now and our next discussion, I hope today is the day a Mirror of Calandra drops for you.
Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.